I recognize the member from Spadina Fort York.
Okay. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. It's a real pleasure and an... Sorry? Oh, I'm getting the script. Okay. Thank you. I move second reading of Bill 78, an act establishing a Commissioner for Democratic Rights.
MPP Glover has moved second reading of Bill 78. Can we just have some quiet in the House, please? Thank you. MPP Glover has moved second reading of Bill 78, an act establishing a Commissioner for Democratic Rights. Pursuant to Standing Order 100, the member has 12 minutes for their presentation.
Okay. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. So it's a real honour to rise in this House and to speak about Bill 78 to create a Commissioner for Democratic Rights Act 2025. And so I'm going to ask for a bit of participation here. Would any of my colleagues volunteer just one principle of a democracy? How do you know that you live in a democracy? One thing that you know that makes you know that you live in a democracy. Anybody? Sorry? Elections. Okay. Another? Something else? How do you know you live in a democracy besides elections? Free speech. Free speech. Okay. Anything else? Participation? Okay. Okay. So elections, free speech, and choice. I can tell you that our right to elections has been interfered with by this government over the last 8 years. Our right to a democratic election in 2025, a provincial election, was interfered with. And I'll explain how. Our right to free speech has been overridden by two pieces of legislation using the notwithstanding clause. This global backsliding, this is part of a pattern of global backsliding into authoritarianism, and we see it in countries around the world. Leaders get elected, and then they consolidate power. They remove the checks of the legislature, the police, and the courts on their power. They manage or manipulate the mainstream media. They build a loyal following through a rabbit hole of algorithms of social media. And all of this consolidation of power is tied to corruption. And we see it in this backsliding of democracy in the United States and other nations, and we do see it right here in Ontario. So in 2018, when this Conservative government was first elected, one of their very first actions was to cancel 4 regional chair elections and to change Toronto's election from 47 to 25 seats.
I know it's been a long day. It's close to Christmas, so I'm going to ask you again to just keep the voice down. I'm trying to concentrate on hearing the member. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Speaker. So in 2018, they cancelled 4 regional chair elections and changed Toronto's election from 47 to 25 seats in the middle of a campaign period. And this was fought all the way to the Supreme Court. And in 2021, the Supreme Court ruled that in Canada, we do not have the right to democratic municipal elections. We have the right to federal and provincial elections, but not to municipal elections. And with this power, with this decision, this government has run amok. One of the first things they did afterwards was to introduce strong mayor's powers. And with strong mayor's powers, the mayor and a third of city councillors can overrule the votes of two-thirds of elected councillors. So we have minority vote rule in the majority of our municipalities in Ontario. This Premier has also removed our elected school trustees. We've been electing school trustees since 1816 in Ontario, and previous to that in Upper Canada. He's attacked student unions with Bill 33. And these school board trustees and the student unions, they have been fighting against this government's agenda to privatize our schools, our colleges, and our universities. So what they're doing is they're undermining the people that we elect to protect our education system in this province. This Premier, he wants to be not just the Premier. He was elected to be the Premier of Ontario, and that's just fine. That's who he is. That's what he was elected to do. But he also wants to be the Mayor of Ontario. He wants to be the chair of every school board in Ontario. He wants to control what every elected student union does in every college and every university in Ontario. And that's a dangerous consolidation of power. In a democracy, laws apply equally to everyone. Bill 5, passed by this government in the spring of this year, gives the government to declare any part of the province a special economic zone where they can break any provincial or municipal law. So and they don't have to come back to the legislature to do it. The cabinet can do it by decree. So the cabinet ministers have the power to determine who the laws apply to and who is exempt. This is a violation of the rule of law, which is a fundamental principle of democracy. In a democracy, the justice system is a check on elected governments. This premier, when he was first elected, one of his first acts was to try to appoint his friend, Ron Taverner, to be the chief of police of the OPP. And since then, yes, he did do that. And since then, he has boasted about appointing conservative judges. He says, I don't want to appoint NDP or Liberal judges, I want to appoint conservative judges. Well, judges are not supposed to be NDP or Liberal or Conservative or Green. They're supposed to be nonpartisan and impartial. That's a fundamental right that is enshrined in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms of this province, and this Premier is boasting about overriding that. And when you look at the control that they're seizing over the justice system, this government is under RC&P investigation for the Greenbelt scandal. One of the recipients of their skills development fund is now under investigation by the OPP. So that's why there needs to be a separation of power between the elected officials and the justice system. But this government's tried to cloud that separation. One of the other principles of a democracy. In a democracy, freedom of speech is a fundamental democratic right. So this government, as I mentioned before, they have passed 2 pieces of legislation and actually introduced 3 pieces of legislation that strip Ontarians of our right to freedom of speech and our other charter rights and freedoms using the notwithstanding clause. And in one example of this, in Bill 307, they used the notwithstanding clause to prohibit the third-party advertising that was critical of the government 12 months before the election, the 2022 election. And this went all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court ruled in March of this year that this Bill 307 violated not only our right to freedom of speech, it also violated our right to a free and fair provincial election. So this government passed legislation that they then used to prohibit advertising 12 months before the elections of 2022 and 2025, giving them an unfair advantage, but also disenfranchising our right to a free and fair election in 2022 and 2025. And this consolidation of power is tied to corruption. And I mentioned this earlier. There is a circular economy of corruption. Donors give the governing party thousands of dollars in donations so that they can win elections. And in exchange, what we've seen is this government gives millions of tax dollars to donors. And a good example of this is that the Premier's dentist gave $20,000 to the Conservative Party and received $2 million taxpayer dollars from the Skills Development Fund to train his staff. That's, if return on investment, you invest $20,000, you get a $2 million return. That's a 9,900% return on investment. That is a really, really good return on investment. However, it means that there's $2 million less dollars to put into our schools, our colleges, our universities, our hospitals, to increase ODSP rates so that we don't have people, with disabilities living in destitution, to build affordable housing. That's where that $2 million should have gone to. So this is, and when I talk about this, one of the things is with this circular economy of corruption that happens, where our tax dollars are used, to fund, to give to donors instead of to our public services, people lose their faith in the democratic system. 57% of eligible voters did not vote in the last provincial election. And why? Particularly young people, newcomers, marginalized people are losing their faith in the system. They say it doesn't make a difference. And this is because this government is not addressing their concerns. The cost of housing is unaffordable. The cost of food is unaffordable. People are saddled with student debts that take decades to pay back. And the economic challenges that people face keep worsening as this government and other governments keep prioritizing giving our tax dollars to donors. And you look at it's not just the tax dollars, it's also our public assets. It's the Greenbelt, it's Ontario Place, it's the Science Centre, and soon to be with Bill 33, which gives the Minister of Education the power to sell off our schools. It's going to be our schools, it's going to be our colleges, our universities. They're all going to be sold, and soon I would bet the hospitals. They're going to be sold off to their friends and donors so that they can provide us services at a profit. Just like the last Liberal government sold off Ontario Hydro, and now we buy back our hydro at an inflated cost so that they can generate a profit. We need a commissioner whose job it is to protect the right of Ontarians to vote, to participate, and to be represented fairly by their government. In Ontario, we say we don't want to be the 51st state, and we need to act like it. So having a Commissioner of Democratic Rights is a first step in defending the democracy that we must pass on to our children, our grandchildren, and their children. So I am hoping that all of the members in this House, when you vote today, think this is not just a vote on a bill, this is a vote to restore our democratic rights in this province, to have a person who's going to be a watchdog, not just over this government, but all future governments, to make sure that future generations of Ontarians live in a healthy, robust democracy. I hope all members in the House will support this bill. Thank you.